Hey y'all, I've had a few questions about how to take a process that you've created or a recipe within Pixyz Studio and distill that into a script. What's the process? Let's get into it. So I'm going to go ahead and do a guided import on the roller conveyor XT file that I pulled off of GrabCAD, so just the generic asset. I did notice when I pulled this in that it comes in on its side, so just to demonstrate that, when I hit execute, it's coming through sideways, so I don't really want that. So instead, I can very simply grab this and force the manual orientation of Z up, and then it's going to reorient in the way that I want it to. So now we are all good to go there. And let's say that I have somebody that has said, hey, I'm trying to run a cable under the floor. So I need to dig a 1-inch deep trench that goes across the floor, put the wiring down, fill it back in like it was never there. But I don't want you to have to move your equipment and stop the production line while I'm running this cable. So what I need is for you to show me everything that is touching the ground that is fixed that I have to run around. So to do that, I essentially want to select everything touching the ground. I want to export that and then test if that exported file represents everything that touches the ground correctly. If so, then we're going to distill it into a script, which means we need to be watching our history over here in the right. So the best way, I think, to make a selection across a plane is to use the selection tool up here in the tools. I'm going to tick that on, uncheck keep proportion so that I can make this a rectangular prism instead of a cube. If you had it on and then you scaled one of these up, it would adjust it all and keep the proportion of what you have, which is definitely not what we always want. So I'm going to turn off the selection, turn it back on, pull it down here. And once I have what I want selected, we should be good to go. Anything that ends with a E and a negative number, just set that to 0. It's just a number that's been set there that more or less means 0. So what we could do here, if they needed it even more simplified, is we could break this into individual faces as their own components and then only export the faces touching the ground. But due to the level of complexity of this system, which is not very high at all, I'm just going to export the entire feet pieces here that are touching the ground. So that's extremely easy. We have all of our numbers here that we like. I can now hit select, so I now have those selected. And then I can do File, Export Selection. I'm going to export these as feet v1. And I'm going to make this a .fbx. Then I can do a guided import, grab that feet v1 fbx, and uncheck manual orientation, so it'll just handle it in an automatic capacity. And now I have the conveyor selected here. I have my feet selected here. And if I want, I can uncheck the visibility and hand this off to the person that just needs to know where they're routing this cable through. So that's what we're going to take and put into a script. The first thing that I need to do is have a script to start with. And there are a few ways to do this. For those of you that know programming, it's not difficult to just start completely from scratch. For those of us that are a little bit less familiar with Python, I find it extremely useful to just grab a sample script and start here. So I have all of this stuff inside of a sample script, which basically is saying from the import, we're going to define a process and then we're going to run the process. So very simple. It has all the syntax that I really need here, which is great. So what I'm going to do is save as, and then I'm going to go into this roller and save it as a .py file, and we're going to call it touching floor. And what I want to do is work backwards through what I've done. So we're going to assume that the file's already imported in here before we run this script. I'm going to delete this out. And really what I need to do, so I'll leave the declaration of all scene equals scene.getRoot. So that would be the word all scene means the root. We don't need to repair the CAD because we've already done a guided import. We don't need to tessellate because we've done a guided import. We don't need to repair the mesh because we're not really here for optimizing. We could do remove holes if need be. We don't need the hidden removal. And we don't really need the delete patches. We can leave the decimate for now. But what I do need is a selection using the selection tool. So in order to get to that, there are a few ways to do it. But what I'm going to do is come up here to functions. And you can generally search in here for different type of functions that you want to be using. And you can copy those to clipboard. One thing that I'm going to do is instead of using this, which is kind of the shortcut, I'm going to pull up the API. So if I go to Pixyz API, I'll then see that there's a reference right here. And within this, I see a link to go straight to here. And let's see, within this, what I want to do is essentially Control F and look for what I'm trying to get to. So let's assume that I'm trying to get occurrences that are within the box, so the selection box. So I'm going to say in box. And I see that typing in box gives me one command across the entire site. So I have select part occurrences in box. So what I can do is copy this and take this back over here and paste this in. And then what I can do if I want to maintain good hygiene is just come in here and comment, selecting whatever is in the box. Then we notice in here that we have box and strictly includes listed. So I want to come back out here and see that strictly includes is a Boolean. So in actuality, this should say true or false. So I'm going to change strictly includes to false because we do not want to strictly include objects. What that would mean is if we have it strictly include, it would not include these because they are not included within their entirety within this selection box. If I dragged this up, they would eventually become included, but I want it to grab anything that touches the ground at all. So I'm going to leave that turned off. So I want this to be false, but then I need to know how to declare box. So there's Booleans here that I can look at. There's extended box as a type. So let me come into extended box. I've clicked on that and I can now see up here that we have a box is defined by a location and extension sizes. So we have 0.3 position and then distance x10, x, y, and z. And if I want to, I can then click here and look at what distance is. So distance is simply a double and then a 0.3. So that's a type of variable. Again, this is getting a little bit in the weeds of programming, but that's the intention of this video. So what I can do is come back into this box layout, which is right. Let me just come back up here and click on extended box. And this is what we care about. So I need to do this. I'm going to copy and paste this over here. And this can all be defined within here. So I need, let's just call this box to equal. And now what I want to do just to keep this nice is come in here and make this easy to read. Okay, so 0.3 position is one that I believe I'll want to declare again separately just to make this easier. So I'm going to say position equals, and the position within this is that 0.3, which is going to be this double x, y, and z. So now I can come over here and do the same thing, make it nice and clean. And the nice thing is within a double, I'm just going to replace this with values. So another way for this to read is box equals position, and then 3 values for size or scale. So actually it coincides with what we're looking at over here quite well. So let's say we're going to do the scale or size first, which will more or less directly copy what we have up here. So 1740. Distance y will be 69.7, so we'll just call that 70. And the z is 736. Okay, so I'm happy there. And then what we want to do is switch this out for the word position so that we're just going to call what's up here. Instead of trying to have this nested within this other thing, it's just going to keep things a lot more clean. So I'm going to change double x to 0 for position, double y to -90, and double z to 1.6, which some of these may be irrelevant. This is all just kind of getting it quick and dirty done. If I wanted to, I could certainly come in here, make all of these nice numbers that still do what I need it to do, and we would be fine there. But I'm just going to leave it here because this does what I need it to do for now. So now we want to select part occurrences, and we want to select them within this box. We do not want strictly included to be on. And then what I want to do is to export the selection. So if I come back up here, I can search export selection. And export selection, I see I have IO export selection file name false. And false is a Boolean for keep intermediary nodes. So I'm just going to leave that false. I don't really care about the hierarchy, so I'm going to copy this. And then I can come back over here and do in fact, I'm just going to remove decimate so that this is clean and easy to see. And here I'm going to say export the selection. And then it's looking for file name and false. So false is a Boolean. We don't need to declare it. File name is something we do need that we do not have. So I'm going to type in file name equals. And now let's come back over here and look at what output file path, which is the type, needs to be written as. And it has alias of file path. So now I can click on that. And it takes me to another thing here. So it is just looking for a string, which is just a basic file location. So because it's looking for a string, for those of you that know basic programming, whatever comes next is going to need to be in quotes. So this is looking for an actual location. I'm just going to do capital C to ensure I'm looking at the right thing. And then let's just say we're going into my desktop. So this could be specified to go anywhere. And this is going to go into test_data_generic and roller. Export V, let's just call it V5 and make sure that it's different than everything else. And I want to name this with a suffix, so file extension. So file name now, as a string, is looking for this. I could go in here and confirm that this is all where I want it to go. But for now, I believe I can come in here and go to roller and grab this. So if I wanted to just copy and paste, I could do that. The only thing that I'll make note of here is that you need to change the backslashes where they come in as forward. But I'm just going to leave it where it's at. And now that we have file name indicated, the export selection will have a file name that it's looking for, and it will say false. So I can now undo this selection tool. And when I run this, theoretically, if this is all matching and these different variables are declared properly, this will give me a new file in this path that we can then re-import. So what we should see when we hit play here is a CAPTCHA, which is just a security mechanism within Pixyz Studio to ensure that you don't somehow run this headless without having the headless version installed, which is called Scenario Processor. And I'm going to hit run. And we do see the CAPTCHA, which is good. And let me validate that. Okay, seems good. So it does have these selected. So my hope is that when we go to this path, that we are going to see a new file. So let me come back out to generic, go into roller. And I know exactly why that didn't work, because I have data and generic switched, which is where I probably should have just copied and pasted, huh? Well, that's a helpful lesson there. So now when I hit play, we should see the CAPTCHA again. Gonna validate this. And now let's validate. And that's the difficult thing, is that we didn't see an error because it was exporting as far as it knew. Now let's say I go into raw import, bring in this FBX, and theoretically, we are going to see all of the feet here, which is perfect. So if I turn off the roller conveyor, we're going to see all of the feet here that have been selected. We can hand this off to our person who has reached out to us to ask about what they can run their wiring around. And this is a very basic script that we've now written just from recreating it from the Sample Scripts 101. One thing to note, if I didn't say this earlier, is that you cannot save to the file location that the sample scripts live in, because it's within your program files on the C disk, theoretically. So you do want to save this to a separate document location. Okay, so now the real test. So we're taking this script that we've made for one piece and we want to apply it to a bunch. So I'm going to do a guided import of this XT file. We know that we want to change its orientation manually. Here it is. And now let's say we had 4 of these. And they're going to be at various areas that are not necessarily making sense. So it's not something obvious that we could just infer. Something like that. So now this person needs to run cable through something like this, and it gets more and more complex. The cool thing is, if I come over here into the tools, look at the selection tool, and I type in my variables here. We can do -90, 1.6, and this is just the manual part, just to test what we're doing. So we can do 1740, 70, and 736. And we see that doesn't select everything. So now what I want to do is just increase the scale. And I'll move this slightly this way. And I see that we need to increase the scale this way as well. There we go. So now I have everything selected that I care about. I've expanded this bounding box to as wide as the factory floor is. And I've changed some of these settings. So now I have 81 that I'm going to reflect in my code. -90, and now let's say 527. And the only reason that these numbers are changing is because the size of my overall factory floor is changing. So as long as this is by default as big as your factory floor, you really don't need to change this at all. And then let me change this to 2015, we'll say. 70, and then we have 1929, so we'll call that 1930. So now all of my settings are updated to accommodate this type of floor plan. And when I come in here and I hit run, and let's just call this export 7, and hit validate, and it is now running. Looks good. And then if I want to come back in here and do a raw import of this export v7, and I want to turn all of these off, we now have everything touching the floor that needs to be routed around saved. So that's the utility of creating these scripts, is that you don't have to redo this for everything. And if these numbers were the same, the factory floor was all a fixed amount of dimension, I wouldn't have even needed to change any of these numbers to accommodate. I hope you learned something. Today we walked through the API reference document, how to leverage that into creating your own scripts, especially by leveraging the sample scripts that come with Pixyz Studio. Please reach out with any questions. Like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again for watching, and have a great day. See you in the next one.